Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming in. So in this session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly create an API on live using a platform called Choreo. First, let me introduce myself. I am Ajanthan Balachandran, Senior Lead Solution Engineer at WSO2. I have pretty good background in API security, API management, integration, and identity and access management technology. So let's quickly go through the agenda. First, let me introduce the Choreo. This is a SaaS platform I'm going to use to demonstrate how to create a API very quickly. And then I will basically design and deploy and then test the API live. Yeah, so this is the platform I'm going to use. So basically, it is called Choreo, developed by WSO2. WSO2 is a traditional integration company offering API management and identity and access management product to help digital transformation with a lot of enterprise users. Yeah, so you might be thinking, okay, there are a bunch of platforms, open source and SaaS offerings available to create like services and API and integration. Why, why another one, right? What's the need? Why can't we use existing services and open source to build API and integration platforms? First, uh, let me think about the problem that we are going to solve using integration or API platform. So basically, the purpose of the platform is to build digital products, right? But nowadays, it's not about a digital product. Enterprises are moving towards building a digital experience. Of course, in order to build a digital experience, you need building blocks, right? Services, backend core systems, APIs, mobile application, single page application, right? These are the building blocks you need to deliver a digital experience. So digital experience should be personalized, customized according to real-time events, locations, and other predictive detail based on the customer behavior, based on the environment. So you have to adapt the experience according to a lot of different factors, right? Yeah. So you can build a different digital experience using by building a lot of digital product and services. But there are two options, right? Either you can build from scratch, maybe you can use off the shelf services and product, or you can buy pre-built services, right? But nowadays it is not like good option because if you can buy, your competitor also can buy the same product, right? You cannot differentiate among your competitor buying pre-built services or pre-built digital experience for your company. That's why nowadays we are calling that every company on earth are software company. They have to build product, and every engineer at the companies, they are building software services and products, right? Basically, they are developers. Yeah, so you can build and you can use a lot of off-the-shelf uh, uh, product and services. Of course, you can't build infrastructure as a service from scratch, or you can use the building blocks already existing, right? Maybe a commercial or open source, but there are a bunch of choice, right? So this is a cloud native landscape. So if you want to build a cloud native platform, these are the options for different purpose. So basically, you have to evaluate, right? You should have a evaluation policy. First of all, you have to determine what are you going to build, what are the requirements, and what are the evaluation criteria, right? And then you have to evaluate one by one and choose, and then build. So it's a long process, right? Still, you haven't started building your digital product or service. That is your main goal, right? But before that, you have to do a lot of homework, right? A lot of analysis to determine and build a digital platform. So if you take a typical digital transformation project life cycle, So you usually start with requirements, right? Requirements, and then determine and finalize the architecture, and then you start to evaluate by conducting different vendors or selecting different open source, and you will be maybe building POC, etc. Then you will choose one or two vendors, and then you started to build actual production setup, right? So after that only you will get a chance to build your digital services, right? So along the timeline, you are going to spend only 25% of the time of the project life cycle to actually build your product. So that is what your business cares, right? So, but this timeline proportional to the budget as well. So not only time equals to money. So you have to spend that much of money as well. But only this 25% of the time plus money is going to influence the business outcome, right? Return on investment. So yeah, so that's why. So nowadays, enterprises are expecting to build a digital platform rather building services and API in an isolated manner. They want to have a framework in place so that they can repeat this cycle, right? Building API, building application. So in order to repeat this cycle, they are expecting a platform to enforce like engineering best practices, development, software development best practices, etc. Right? So you need to have a digital platform or a platform to build on top of that. Yeah. So from the business perspective, the platform should have technical capabilities as well as business capabilities, which are building blocks for your digital services and experience, right? So usually this your API, your application, web app, single page application, your VR application, etc. Should the platform should have those capabilities so that your developers as well as semi-technical business people should be able to build a digital experience in a repeated manner. Meanwhile, following all the common software engineering standards, such as there should be a CI/CD platform, you should be able to do continuously build and deploy, test and move to production, and you have to follow the Scrum methodology, right? So by adapting that a new platform, you should not abandon those common practices. You have to also follow that as well. Yeah. So this is the promise that given by Choreo. So basically, Choreo is a digital platform as services to build a digital experience very fast without spending like years or months or weeks. Yeah. So the common expectation is you will be able to build digital building blocks such as API and integration within hours compared to weeks or months. So these are the features at very high level Choreo offers. So you start with the development, right? For the development, so usual software development best practices is use a JIT-based approach, right? You continuously iterate, develop things, push and test locally, and then deploy to the production. Then you expose that to your live customers, right? So you should follow that common standard, engineering standard. So that from the development perspective, Choreo offer that one. So when you develop, there are two options. Either you can write a code to build your API and API integration, so which is useful to build very complex use cases. The code will provide you flexibility to build very complex use cases. But if it's a very lightweight use case where you want to plump things or transform payloads, you could use low-code approach, which is a graphical-based approach where you drag and drop and you build a complete integration. So which is useful for your semi-technical or business people as well. And from marketplace perspective, when you build things, you may have to share commonly reusable building blocks with others, right? To avoid duplicate of work. For that, we have this marketplace where you can build API and integration and share with other teams so that they can consume and reuse your logics, right? And then, of course, you have to test it. Korea has a testing framework where you can do unit test as well as integration test. So when at the end of the development, when you push the code to the Choreo, Choreo will run all your tests. Then after you also can do manual testing. Of course, CI/CD also built in. So at the end of the development cycle, you will be pushing to the Git repository. Then Choreo automatically build a CI/CD pipeline for you. It will run the test and then push to the Kubernetes environment. We will be talking about in the coming slide. So in addition to that, once you have integration service and API available, so you have to expose to internal usage or external usage, right? But before exposing, you have to worry about security, rate limiting, and analytics. Choreo offer API management out of the box. You can secure your unsecure integration or API using command standards such as O2. Of course, in addition to that, it should be production ready, right? You should have all the observability logs, all the operation level analytics as well as business level analytics will be provided. So not only the operation level people, also the business level people will have insight into what's happening with your integration service. So this is a high level architecture. Whatever we talked here, I have just distilled down into a diagram. So you will have like a finalized system architecture, right? This is different for individual companies or organization. Then teams will start to build components. Components could be your REST API, your gRPC service, or scheduled task, etc. Right? Different enterprise component. The building, there are two options, graphical user interface. You can use graphical user interface to drag and drop and build the integration or API, or else you can use direct coding. So based on the audience or based on the developer, you can choose both approach. But regardless of the approach, the Choreo will generate a couple of source code files which will be committed to Git repository. Either you can use Choreo managed GitHub or Git repository, or you can provide your own Git repo. Then it will build this CI/CD pipeline. Basically, it will build the artifact, run the test if you have written unit test as well as integration test, and then it will deploy on a Kubernetes cluster. So after that, the running service you could expose as a managed API through Choreo gateway. So it will be available in the developer portal. Developer portal you can use internally as well as for external consumption as well. So in the developer portal, you can discover, subscribe, and get the credential to consume your API. So in addition to that, this in the marketplace, you can publish a connector for your API. Basically, connector means the SDK for Choreo. So usually, when you have REST API, you can generate SDK for different language and framework, right? Similarly, so we adapted same methodology from the Swagger definition. We automatically generate Choreo connector, basically Choreo SDK to consume that API so that others can easily consume your API using either code or graphical interface. Yeah. So in order to implement everything, so other cross-cutting concerns also the Choreo is taking care of, basically managing entire infrastructure, including security and observability. In addition to that, we also have artificial intelligence-based performance prediction. While you are developing your integration, the our system will, based on the previous history, it will predict your performance. So without running, you will see, okay, there's a hotspot, right? So we predict, and then you can basically refine your code. Not only that, so when you do mapping, right, data mapping, our intelligence system will analyze your input and output and suggest automated mapping. So those are also available as additional capability through our artificial intelligence or AI layer. Yeah. So this is a promise, right? So previously, so you were spending around 25% of your time to develop your actual digital product and service. With Choreo, you can increase that time to 75%. So it's provide everything in place, right? You don't need to worry about evaluating different technology, building different things according to common engineering standards such as CI/CD, observability, etc. Everything is built in. You can just focus on your developing your business logic, right? So that will increase the developer productivity as well as return on investment from the business perspective. Yeah. So this is what previously we have shown, and with the Choreo, we can increase the productivity by 75%. Yeah, that's it about introduction to the Choreo. Do you have any questions before jumping into the demo? Yeah. So let me quickly jump into the demo. So basically, if you want to try Choreo, so you can go to wgs2.com Choreo. Basically, either you can create a trial account, or else you can try the Choreo anonymously if you don't want to create an account. You will get full capability, but once you're done with your development and testing, we will destroy your account within 1 day. But if you want to have a persistent account, you can create a trial account. I have already created account for me. So when you log into the Choreo, you will see this home page where you can see your recent services and integration. And these are the digital building block, right? Choreo right now support. So you can create REST API, or if you want to create a proxy, basically if you want to securely expose an existing REST API, you can use REST API proxy. Then if you want to build a task, there are 3 types of tasks based on how you're going to trigger. The manual trigger based on the time, and then based on the webhook, right? We provide a URL, and when you call that URL, basically this will be executed. And you can tie that URL to event from different systems, right? GitHub commit or Twilio or SMS, right? There are different events trigger. You can tie that webhook to different event source, so that when those events occur, we run the scheduled task. And the WebSocket and gRPC, it's on the roadmap. We are still developing that component. Then if you go here, you can see some samples. So basically, it's a pre-built sample to demonstrate the capability of the product. There are a lot of different samples available. You can go and try. And all the components are listed here. And this is a marketplace. So basically, the marketplace is where you publish your connector, right? SDK for your service. For the internal services from your organization, you can see the list of connector here. For well-known SaaS and other system, also we have created a connector for you, and you can readily use. For example, if you want to consume a spreadsheet, online spreadsheet, you can use this connector to build your integration, right? Yeah. So in the demo, what I'm going to build is a simple composite service. From the high level, this is what I'm going to demonstrate. Basically, from the location, figuring out nearby ATM and then display. So the input is longitude and latitude, right? GPS coordination. And the output should be a list of ATMs, right? Address and etc. Yeah, so to implement this one, I'm going to use existing services. So basically, this is an API, composite API. It's going to combine multiple different API by calling and then merging the responses, right? So the geo services, basically input is GPS coordination. So it will use, I'm going to use geo services, geo service to get the zip code based on the longitude and latitude. And then another service which will provide, when you provide a zip code, it will give bunch of bank codes or identifier that resides in that zip code, right? And then in order to collect additional information about the bank branch or the bank identifier, I'm going to call this ATM information service, which will provide additional details, right? So from the high level, so this is going to be the design. So API consumer, it could be your mobile application or your single page application. It will send a longitude and latitude to the composite service, and then it will first call geo service and then bank code service. It will give array of code, right? A lot of more than one bank code, and then we have this ATM service which accept only one code. So it will loop through all the arrays and call individually and then build a payload. Again, array of location details, right? And it will send to the caller. So that is what I'm going to build it now. So in order to build a new component, so you can go to component tab and then create a new one. So here it suggests what type of component you want to develop, right? So here I'm going to develop a REST API. Yeah. So there are two approach. So if you have existing code, you can reuse to build your API, or you can create from scratch. And also in the future, we are going to support importing your Swagger or OpenAPI specification. But in this demo, I'm going to develop from scratch. So basically, you will have to give a name. Yeah, and let me give a name, API, and you can also give a description. So there are two types of API you can create, for external usage and internal usage. So based on this choice, the security will be applied properly. So if it is internal, then it will make sure that from the network level as well as from the security level, nobody will be able to access from the internet, right? So I am going to make it external. And then, so source code, right? How you are going to manage source code? Either you can use Choreo provided repository, so it will create a repository for you, or else you can connect your enterprise Git repository, right? So I'm going to choose the management, Choreo management. So this will basically create all the required artifacts. Basically, it will create a Git repository and then create a skeleton project for you so that you can start immediately. And it will build a CI/CD pipeline for you, and it will create every resources required for you to start developing. So it will take a couple of minutes in order to reduce the time. I have already created a project. So let me open that one. Yeah. So basically, it will create a skeleton project, right? So in order to start developing, so you will first move to the development space, right? So here you can see different phases, right? You develop, deploy, test, and then in the manage phase, you will move to the production, right? Then you can observe, right? You will collect you will see all the observability and other analytics, right? So first you have to start develop phase. So you basically you have to edit this code, right? So this is what I was talking about. This is a graphical mode. Basically the sequence diagram. So you basically build a sequence diagram, and in the backend, Korea will automatically translate that sequence diagram into code. Either or else you can also use code directly. So the way you develop is, so you click this one, it will spin up VS Code, online VS Code. So in future, you will be able to check out the source code from your local machine and use your local VS Code. But now it will spin up VS Code online version, and then there you can do a full development, right? Yeah. So from the API design, first step is so you have to design your API interface, right? What is the resource? What are the input and output? So basically, it will be like this. So the input should be it should accept 2 integer, and the output should be this array of this JSON, right? Yeah. So let me design that first. So let me first delete the existing code. So in order to design the interface, right, API interface, so this is the resource, right? You can click this edit button. So it will prompt the editing option for your API interface. Let me change this API resource name to maybe ATM, and it's going to right now it's not accepting any parameters, but we have to accept 2 parameters, right? So I'm going to choose query parameter. So you can use path parameters as well, adding by adding here, as well as you can choose query parameters. So let me choose that one. Longitude. And we need one more parameters. Yeah. So that's the input. So output, so it requires a complex type, right? JSON is a complex type. So it's a user-defined type, right? We can't use already defined primitive types such as string or integer. So in order to do that, first I have to create my user-defined data type for the output. So let me save this current work. And the way you define a user-defined type through a record. So I have to create a record here. Record, you should have a name, maybe ATM info. Yeah, it's validate. And either you can build the record type by adding individual field, or else if you have a JSON already, you can paste that and create. So Korea will figure out the data types from the sample payload and create a record for you, a user-defined type for you. So I'm going to use that feature. So it was able to figure out figure out the details from my sample payload, right? So now I can go and change the return type. So return type, so we should return array of ATM info, right? So basically, error, if there's any error, maybe error while connecting other services, etc. Either it will throw an error or give a valid answer, right? So now the idea is, okay, I have to return array of ATM info record. So let me create a variable first, and then individually collect record and add individual ATM info, right? So that's a approach I'm going to take. First, let me introduce the variable type ATM info array. It should be array. Let me name it. This is our response, right? And I'm going to initiate empty array. And then whenever record is available, I'm going to push individual record into the array. Yeah. The first thing, first thing I have to call GeoService, right? We have already set up this input parameters. Now I have to call this GeoService. So GeoService an existing internal service. For that, I have already generated, Corio already generated a connector for this service. So I'm going to use that connector to call this internal service. The way you input connector like this. So here you can see, right? So either you can use a connector or you can build the HTTP request yourself, right? So, but of course, if you use connector, you don't need to worry about other details such as URL and other input and output parameters, right? So I'm going to import connector. And you can see the commonly used SaaS platform here. So these connectors are already pre-built for you. For example, if you want to tweet from here, you can use this tweet connector to call Twitter API to send a tweet, right? So now let me search Geo1. We have thousands of connectors, so that's why I have to search. So this is a service, internal services. So internal services, again, it is secured. So in order to use, consume that API, you need to provide a credential. Of course, hard coding your oath credential in the source code is not a good practice. So you have to have placeholder variable, and then you inject those critical sensitive information during the runtime for implement like a secure coding practice, right? So let me create a placeholder variable. So we called configurable. Basically, you can create a variable and inject actual value during the runtime. So I'm going to create a client ID a string type. And then for the secret also, I'm going to use a placeholder variable. Yeah, so this will initiate the connector, right? Connector with credential. Then I have to choose operation, right? So this is the operation, only operation supported, but if there's a multiple operation, you will see list of operation. So based on the operation, it will ask, okay, how to determine the input parameters, right? The longitude and latitude, it's already defined from the service input, right? So let me choose that longitude. So we have already defined from the service definition, and then the variable to store the return, right, response. It will be zip code, right? So let me name the variable. So now it is pulling that SDK, right? SDK is hosted in a marketplace. It is doing a pull and then merging into my source code. Yeah, now we have zip code. So the next step is to call this bank code services by giving the zip code, right? So let me, again, for this also, I have already generated a connector for these internal services. So let me import that connector. Yeah. So again, here also I am going to use a placeholder variable to give a credential. So in the Choreo, rather than using individual credential for different API, you can combine all your credential into a single credential and use for multiple API. So that is convenient, but for security purpose, you might have to create a different credential for individual API. But for the sake of demo, I'm going to use the same credential to invoke all the internal API. So we have already a placeholder for that. So let me reuse that placeholder. Yeah. So the next one is, choose the operation. So it will give bank code by zip, right? So we have to provide a zip code. Zip code actually storing the payload, right? So under the payload, it's a JSON with a value as a one and only argument, which will give array of numbers, right? Identifier. So that's why I'm going inside the payload and retrieving a specific parameters. So basically, this is how you access the JSON parameters, right? The zip code will be a response, which is JSON. Within that JSON, there's a attribute called value, which will have array of code, bank code. Yeah. So then name the variable. Let me rename the variable. It's a branch codes, right? Yeah. So now we have this array of branch code, right? So then we have to do a looping, right? Individual looping and call the API with individual bank code. Basically, here, rather than initiating the connector for ATM info service for each and every bank code, I'm going to use already initiated connector and call the operation multiple times, right? So that's how you can utilize the resource in an optimal manner. So let me initialize the connector once and then call the operation multiple times. So ATM info service.
Quick question. Where does it pull the operation from that variable? Does it pull it from the UML itself, from the background?
So basically, after building your API, right, internal API, you will ask Choreo to generate connector. Choreo will generate these from Swagger definition, right? So basically, this is when you build the interface, it will also generate Swagger definition. From the Swagger definition, it will generate the SDK or connector, right? So connector will have all the information, right? Operation mean resources, right? ATM / get by ID, and then the / get by ID will be converted as a operation. So under operation, you will have input data model, output data model, error data model. Yeah, that is how it determining. Yeah. Again, so I'm going to use the same credential, but in the real world, you will be using individual credential for different API. Yeah, so here I'm not going to invoke the API operation immediately. I'm going to initialize first, and then under loop, I'm going to invoke that operations multiple times. Yeah. So now I have to figure out how to do a loop. Here we have a loop for each loop. So for individual record, I have to have a placeholder variable. Let me say it as code, and then I have to tell where to find that code, right? So it is available as a bank branch codes. Again, it is basically a JSON response, right? Under the response, there's a code parameters which will give the array, right? So now the loop is ready. Inside the loop, I have to invoke this connector, right? So let me Yeah, so in order to invoke a particular action, so you have to click the action and then choose already initiated the endpoint, right? So I have to use this last one and then choose this one. That it's expecting a code, right? Bank branch code. So it is available as a code variable inside the loop. So I'm going to use that. And then it will give an ATM info. Yeah, I'm going to store the response in that ATM info variable. Yeah, so now I have individual ATM detail, right? Then I have to push that detail into this response variable. So for that, I have to use the custom statement. It's a specialized statement. Yeah, other, and then, so my response, it's array variable. It has a method called push, and then input is ATM info, right? Yeah, ATM. Let me try it again. Yeah, let me check the variable used here. Yeah, it is ATM info. Okay, save, and here statement response, then push variable. Yeah. Let me check. So basically, this is a diagram view, right? You also can check the code. So basically, you can switch back and forth between code and the graphical. So here it's evident, right? So I deleted the name variable, and that's why it's complaining. So let me correct it from the UI itself. So right now I have to return the response, right? Yeah, so now I can push that ATM info into array. Push. And then semicolon. Yeah, so that's it, right? So we collected zip code and then bank code, and then we are looping through individual branch code and then populating the response, right? So now I'm done with the development. So here I have to quickly test it, right? That's a developer workflow, right? You have to test it and fix if there's a bug, and then finally, if you're done with, you will do a git push, right? So let me test it again. So for that, I have to locally run it. Since it's a cloud ID, so it's going to run on the cloud. So for this, yeah, if you remember correctly, for the internal service credential, I have created a placeholder variables. So now before deploying it, it is asking the real value for those placeholders, right? So let me quickly get the credential. So I have already created this auth application for the internal API. So let me quickly copy that. Client ID should be client ID, and the client secret should be.
So you have to create your own application to generate credentials.
Yeah, in order to consume. Yeah, I will demonstrate that later. Yeah, so now I am done with different or the difference. Yeah, so now it's running locally. So if we are going to use local VS Code, you will be able to run it locally, but it's in the cloud. It's running on the cloud container there. So once it up and running, you can right away test it. So as I said, it will automatically generate a Swagger file for you, your API, right? So now it's going to open now. Try it with basically. Yeah, it's still generating. Let me. Let me run it again.
So while we are waiting, the beauty of this is that you can try this for free. So it's open account, you can create it. So
Okay.
you create it, you can test it anonymously. It's actually creating everything for you. So why is that taking a little bit longer? Because under is actually screening the containerized environment, publishing the code in it, and expose that as a service so that you can test it in GitHub. Because
Yeah, so I'm unable to run locally, so let me quickly push this into production development environment and then demonstrate there. So I'm committing, it's a usual Git workflow. It will commit all the work to the internal Git repository. After that, I can go here and then select a particular version. So let me quickly, so I have already a backup service generated. So after pushing, so you will, development. So you are done with the development. So you will see all of your commits here. So basically you will be able to select a particular commit and then deploy. So it is going to deploy on a development environment. Again, it will ask the client credential and client secret again. So because we are using a placeholder variable. So basically it will build all the required CI/CD and everything. Finally, it will generate a Docker file, then generate all the Kubernetes files required, and it will push the image to the local Docker repository, and then finally it will deploy in a Kubernetes cluster. So once it deployed, you will see an option to test from here. So let me choose another sample.
I'm sorry, real quick. So it'll take the image and automatically turn it into a brand new one.
Yeah, you will see, you will be able to see that from the log files.
it's actually pushing out gateways on the thread. So right now, this endpoint is still not public, but it's allowing you to get in the same experience that your application developer is going to have, including this application.
Yeah. So basically, so once you deploy something, you will be able to test it locally with a local test key, something like that. Yeah, it's a normal Swagger UI. You will be able to test it. if it's success, then you will be able to promote, right? So that it's a development environment, then you will be able to promote the production environment. It will ask all the parameters for the production environment. So eventually you will have two endpoint, separately managed, separate credential, and then you will be able to test it. So once you test it, you will be able to expose from here. So basically, when you create, it will be in the created state, then you will be published. When you published, it will be available in the developer portal where you can consume your services. Yeah, so my time is up. If you have any question, feel free to reach out our booth, WSO2 Loop booth, and we will be able to answer any of your questions. Thanks for attending. Have a nice day.